Look what I got in the mail the other day. It is my official ballot to vote in the upcoming election. And live in Arizona, we have mail-in voting. I could show up, but and generally on my channel, new videos become available on Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. But this one's going to be available on Sunday, 2 days before Election Day here in Arizona, just so I can talk to you about voting. Not who to vote for, just the economics of voting. And before I really get into this, if you're one of my usual viewers, you've seen a bunch of my videos, take a guess. Do you think I will be filling this out and mailing it back? So let's move on to the economics of voting. Basically, does it make economic sense for me to open that envelope, fill it out, seal it back up, and walk it down to the mailbox? And the answer, strictly speaking from economics, it makes absolutely no sense for me to do that. We judge everything in economics, marginal cost, marginal benefit. Marginal benefit's greater than the marginal cost. You do it. Marginal cost is greater than the marginal benefit. You don't do it. So, need to sit down and look at the marginal costs and marginal benefits of me voting. And I'm looking at this strictly from the viewpoint of the individual, not the entire electorate. So, first thing I need to think about is the benefit. Assume I'm a high income earner and there's two candidates running. One has promised to cut my taxes and the other has promised to increase my taxes. Which one do you think I'm going to vote for? Well, whichever one gives me the greater benefit, and for me, I like lower taxes. So, of course, I have the incentive to vote for that person if I decide to vote. But there's a very interesting thing about voting, that being that the results of the election is a public good. So, if my preferred candidate wins and I didn't vote, guess what? I still get the benefit. So I have the incentive to free ride. Let everybody else vote. And if my person gets in, I get the benefit. So when doing this marginal analysis, we can't just look at the benefit. We have to look at what's called the expected benefit. So say I think, maybe I'll say $3,000 a year in taxes if my candidate wins. Keep it in mind that if I don't vote and that my candidate wins, I still get the $3,000. So for the expected benefit, I have to look at what is the chances of my vote making a difference in the election. So for a national election, that an individual vote will make a difference is 10 to the minus 14 or to 10 to the minus 16. In other words, 14 zeros after the decimal point with a 1% chance that your vote is going to make a difference. You have greater odds of being killed by a vending machine or by a cow than you have that your vote will make a difference in the election. So when I multiply that $3,000 benefit times the probability of my vote making a difference, my expected benefit is less than a penny, far less than a penny. So then I got to look at the marginal cost. Oh, they make these things slightly challenging. Have to open it up, get the right color pencil or pen, fill it out. Oh, fill out the boxes like this. You have to stick it in the envelope, sign your name, put a phone number in case they don't like your signature so they can call you up. It's a little bit of a hassle. And what's the opportunity cost of my time? If it's 15 minutes that I have to give up, There's a lot of things I could be doing with that 15 minutes instead of filling this out. For me, the marginal cost is greater than the marginal benefit. It makes absolutely no sense from the viewpoint of economics to vote. Now, when I was going to George Mason University, I specialized in what's called public choice economics, basically the economics of government. And this is one of the things we learned, that the expected benefit is less than the expected cost of voting. It makes absolutely no sense to vote. But there's a problem for us public choice economists. And trust me, I did this story every semester in my micro classes. And then I'd ask the students, well, are you now not going to vote? I never convinced one of them that voting wasn't worth the effort. If they were voters, they were still going to vote, and if they didn't vote before, they still weren't going to vote. But I did not change one mind when I did this. But here's the big problem we have. Economic theory says it's not rational to vote, yet people vote. It's called the voting paradox. That theory says they won't vote, but they do vote. We have to come up with some explanation of why people do actually vote. And what we ought to do is just throw another term into the equation, generally D. I don't know what the D stood for, maybe democracy. That we try to come up with some other idea of why people vote. And it's usually along the lines of, I'm an American, and it's my civic responsibility to vote, so I want to be a good citizen, so I vote. Or an argument I often hear is, if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain about anything. My reaction to that always was, well, I never read that in the Constitution. That says that, hey, if I don't vote, I don't have the right to free speech. There's the argument that, people have given their lives preserving our democracy, so out of respect for that, you should take advantage of your right to vote and vote. So those are the things we tend to throw in there. Now, they also try to indoctrinate us into voting. Bet you somewhere in here, there's one of them little stickers that you put on your chest there. It says, I voted. I swear, some people vote just to get that sticker, because they put that sticker on their chest, they go to work, they walk around like that, showing all their coworkers, look, I'm a good citizen, I voted. And they also like to say, every vote counts. Really? Really? Every vote counts? Does anybody actually believe that? I know it's about 10 years ago here in Tucson, somebody was running for who's ever in charge of the elections. I forget the title of the position. And there was an incumbent in the job, and there's a challenger. And the challenger said their big campaign promise was every vote will be counted. Because what was going on here in Pima County, if they were counting all the votes, there were 200 votes left. And on every decision, 500 votes were already the majority, as in candidate A had 500 more votes than candidate B. Let's just stop counting the votes, because it's not going to change the outcome. It's getting late in the evening. Let's go home, because even the people counting the votes knew that not all votes make a difference. They weren't even bothered counting them. So this challenger said, when I'm elected, I will make sure every vote is counted. Well, yeah, every vote will be counted, but guess what? Those votes aren't going to change the outcome. No one vote ever changes the outcome in a major election. So you can't go for that every vote counts argument. And I would also have students tell me, well, yeah, Dr. Gutwald, it doesn't make sense for you to vote. Well, what if everybody thought of that? And I'd say, well, if everybody showed up at McDonald's at the exact same place at the exact same time and ordered Big Macs, there'd be chaos. But it doesn't happen, so why even worry about it? Plus, we're just looking at individual decision making. No, no way to rationally justify voting without coming up with these abstract ideas about the civic pride, or I want to show off at work, something along those lines. I want to feel part of the process. Okay, back to the question. Am I going to fill this out and mail it back in? I'm an economist. I know it's not rational to do it. I'm going to fill it out and send it back in. Do I think my vote's going to make a difference? I live in Tucson. This is an off-year election. We're doing things like voting for city council. I would generally vote for a Republican. A Republican has a snowball's chance in Haiti of winning a seat on city council here in Tucson. I'm sure my vote isn't going to make a difference. And even when I went to vote and they give me those stickers, I never wore those stickers. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So why am I going to vote? I'm a firm believer in the theory of happy wife, happy life. And I used to tell people, if your wife's this happy, you are allowed to come up to that ceiling. That's your ceiling. You're never going to be happier than she is. So your mission in life is to raise her happiness level. So in turn, your happiness level can go up. So for me, it makes sense. I know if I sit down and fill this out, it will make my wife happy. And if it just lays on the table where I put my other mail that I don't get around to looking at for a couple days, and election day passes, she'll be disappointed in me for not voting. So, to keep the wife happy, I vote, even though I know it won't make a difference. So, go ahead, be mad at me for saying it doesn't make any sense to vote. And please be assured, I've never changed anybody's mind on this. But we have atrocious election turnout rates in this country. And if you want to do something about that, I have just given you a way to do it. Because I said, marginal analysis, marginal benefit, marginal cost. I used to look at my students towards the end of this talk I would give them and say, okay, everybody who's eligible to vote, raise your hand. Now, if you actually vote, leave your hand up. A lot of hands went down. Then I said, if I gave you $100 if you voted, would you vote? Those hands went right back up. So even they knew that the benefit wasn't worth the cost. But when I increased that benefit, boy, were they ready to go vote. So the idea is either increase the benefit or lower the cost. Now, this theoretically lowers the cost. That I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to drive. Now, here in Tucson, the weather's probably going to be nice on Tuesday. But Maine, Montana, it could be snowing, it could be miserable. So having this will get more people to vote. Does open the door to voter fraud, things like that. But I think the story is first Tuesday after the first Monday of November because it was Harvest Festival on the last day of October and they didn't want people hung over on voting day. So that's why it's the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So it would never be November 1st. But society's changed. Go to weekend voting. And if you want to go back to where you actually have to show up for voting, having it on Saturday and Sunday would get better turnout than on Tuesdays. Where, if you're working on Tuesdays, yes, the law says you must be given time somewhere during the day to go out and vote. It could be after work since most polls are open till 7, 8 o'clock. But on the weekend, you don't have that issue. So that's one way to lower the cost. Have more voting booths. There's lots of ways you can actually lower the cost. But I'll leave you with this. Part of me thinks I don't want to make it easier to vote, simply because I think the more you have to work to vote, the more serious you take voting. That I want people who take it seriously. I would love to see some sort of test you have to take before voting, that current affairs, maybe can answer some logic questions. There was a reason the founding fathers restricted the vote, that they only wanted educated people voting. So you can ask yourself, and if you take notice, a right to vote is not in the Constitution. There are amendments that say you can't stop someone from voting if they're a woman, things along those lines. But there is no right to vote in the Constitution. Some people would like to change that. Others, like me, Socrates, Plato were really against democracy, so some good arguments can be made against it. So, thank you for letting me rant. I know people usually don't watch my economics videos, but I'm trying to preserve what little wisdom I have from my education and my experience. And if you found some amusement in this video, think about the little subscribe button right down there, clicking it. Maybe give it a thumbs up, comment, tell me what a terrible person I am, whatever. I'd appreciate it. And as usual, thank you for watching. Have yourself a blessed day.